Hi everyone. We're going to talk about feeding now. In this part of the world, what we do is feed our bees in the fall and typically not again in the spring. So we'll sort of focus on just fall feeding like that. And when we're feeding in the fall, we're trying to get a large amount of feed in as quickly as possible. We have a pretty narrow window in the fall after we've harvested the honey to get the feed in before the weather gets cold. We want to feed the bees when all the field bees, the summer bees, are still alive, when there's a large population of bees that are able to take that syrup down, ripen it, they invert the sugar, the sucrose into glucose and fructose. So that takes them a bit of time and energy, and we want to use those summer bees to do that job. So for right around here, we're feeding in the latter part of September, and that's an ideal time. We get the honey off right after the goldenrod flow is finished, and then feed immediately. We try to feed about 4 imperial gallons per colony, so it's quite a large amount of syrup, and that's 2-to-1 sugar syrup. If you're not able to make up 2-to-1 sugar syrup, it's not a big deal. Just make it up as thick as you can and feed them proportionally of a similar amount. So we'll talk over the different methods now. The one method I'll mention is a frame feeder. So this feeder replaces a frame, and you put that in place of the outside frame here. You pull that frame out and insert this feeder there. Some people put straw or chicken wire in here to help the bees not drown inside there. But you can only put about 1 gallon in there, so you would need to fill it 4 times to get them through the fall. So that's not my preference. Works pretty good for spring feeding if you're wanting to be doing that. So that's the frame feeder. Next method we're going to mention is a pail feeder. This is a pretty commonly used method. For that you need an inner cover with a hole in it, and you put that inner cover on, and then you fill up your pail full of sugar syrup. This is empty right now, but you would turn it over, and it doesn't actually run out, just a little bit runs out, and then it's held in by vacuum pressure. So you turn that over and you place it over top of that hole. We just have a little look here. This one has a screen on it. This is a commercially made pail feeder, but some people just drill a bunch of small holes in the in a lid, and that works pretty well too. So we'll put that over this way. The bees can get up and get at that, and then just to protect that, we put an empty box around it, and then a hive lid goes on top of that. So now we're done. That feeding's done. This method works pretty well, but it's rather slow, so it's also not my favorite method. We'll go on to one more method here before we talk about my all-time favorite method, which is called barrel feeding. So the next method we've got here is a hive top feeder. There's a wooden box with a slot built into the middle so the bees can come up through that into these 2 tanks here. So we set that on the hive like so, and this will hold 4 gallons. So it'll hold a lot of syrup, and we can fill it up all at once, and that's going to be enough for the bees to winter on. So we just pour our syrup in. And I like to dribble just a little bit of syrup down that slot there just to get them going, coming up to look for that syrup. But a lot of bees would drown in there. And some hive top feeders have covers and floats and so on. I prefer to just use straw. The straw gives them a nice float to climb on, and they can come right up through this slot, get out onto the straw, get moving around, and they'll take that syrup down in a matter of, a week, 3 or 4 or 5 days a week, something like that, all depending on how warm the temperatures are. The warmer it is, the faster they can take it down. Once they take it down, they have to ripen it, as I've mentioned, so warm temperatures help them evaporate that. If they don't get it evaporated properly, it will ferment in the comb and that causes sickness. Of course, we would then cover that up and come back in a week or so and take that hive top feeder off. The last method I want to talk about is barrel feeding, and that's what we actually do here for the most part. We take a 40-gallon barrel and we fill it, 45-gallon barrel. We fill it with 40 gallons. So that leaves a little bit of space at the top. We put loose straw on that top there, and then we prop the lid up a little bit with a stick running under the lid. Put some bricks on there so it doesn't blow out, the lid doesn't blow off, and that lid keeps the rain from getting in and causing the honey to ferment. But the bees will come and find that. We'll sometimes leave an excluder there or something to give a bit of scent to it to attract them to the barrels. And very quickly they find where that is. They come back and they do round dances, tell all the other bees to get out and get looking, and it gets to be a real frenzy. They can take that syrup down in 3 days. So what we're feeding 100 hives in this location, we'll set up 10 barrels. We put one 40-gallon barrel out for every 10 colonies, and that's down in 3 days. It's amazing how quickly they can move that syrup in and get it into position in their hive. Some people think that's maybe not a good idea. It might encourage robbing. I totally disagree with that. It actually prevents robbing because the bees get all the food they need very quickly, and they're not interested in robbing after that. They're not interested in checking each other out for food, or even it does prevent them from robbing at our honey house as well. So they're way less of a nuisance if we get them barrel fed and they're done. It's like they just can't get up one more time to go to the buffet table. They're done, and so it's a really good method for feeding bees. So there you go. There's a few methods about feeding bees, and you have to choose what works for you. But all of them will work fine. Just play around a little bit and see what works for you. Thanks for watching.
So today we're just going to finish up with overwintering your colonies and how to prepare them for the winter. So we've already talked about any sort of medication, disease control you're going to have to do in the fall, and also feeding your bees. So we're going to pretend this hive is a well-fed, treated hive, ready to go into winter. We're also going to pretend that it's not a 32-degree July day. So right now we're kind of talking late October, early November. So our bees are kind of shut down for the year. It's getting pretty darn cold. We're ready to shut her down for the year. So all our hives are down to just single brood chambers now, or double brood chambers. Just lid, inner cover, and again the brood chamber and the bees. So that's what we've gotten things down to. With the first little bit of equipment we use during the winter is what's called an entrance reducer or a mouse guard. And that just simply goes in the entrance to exactly do what it sounds like it should do, reduce the entrance. But it also, what it does is protect the bees from having mice hop in from the outside and into the colonies. So this will just slide on in. We'll try not to squish any bees. It should just slide right on into the front of that hive. And really reduce that entrance sound so that the bees can kind of control the cold air that's kind of coming into the colony. And also, especially late fall, it's a good idea to reduce these entrance sounds to deal with any sort of robbing. It's a lot easier for the bees to sort of guard that little bit of territory than it is that whole width of that entrance. So we put in our entrance reducer. That's our first thing. If you're using a screen bottom board, there is an opening at the back, and when it comes into winter and the wind in the winter time, the last thing we want is cross ventilation. So an opening at the back, which would be your regular entrance, and then, at the front, and an opening at the back. And that just allows wind to blow right on through there without the bees being able to control that. So with that screen bottom board, you're gonna have to plug it up somehow. So this is just a beveled back block that just fits in that hole. If you don't have a screen bottom board, you don't have to worry about it, but that would just simply fit in the hole at the back. That's pretty easy to do. So just plug that up. When you're talking about overwintering bees, so we talk about them being able to ventilate and all that sort of stuff. One of the biggest things you're going to need is an upper entrance. So if you're using a wooden inner cover, it should have a little notch on one side, and you're going to want to flip that to open. We don't use that here. You've seen in a lot of the videos, we use this little cloth inner cover. So for that, we have upper entrances drilled into all our boxes here. But this time of year, it's very important that we have those upper entrances. First, for ventilation. During the winter, the bees will ventilate and push air through the colony and for whatever purpose they need. But the second big thing is to get rid of condensation and humidity. Get rid of humidity so it doesn't really condense. These bees are breathing a lot of humid air is coming out, and if all that really warm, moist air is really hitting a really cold surface up top, it can condense and start dripping down on your bees. So anything that so the bees really need an upper entrance in order to push that out, and we're trying to keep that the top part of that hive as least cold as we can possibly do, just to help avoid with that. Those are your two big ones, is airflow and condensation. So we've got that upper entrance. Again, we've got it drilled, but if you had the wooden inner cover, you just have that board flip to open. The next little bit is some sort of insulation. So this is some old roofing insulation. The only sort of insulation you don't really want to put on your hive is anything that can suck up moisture. I know it's a good idea. People seem to think that you want to draw moisture away from the bees, but you can just imagine after 5-6 months in this colony, all that moisture being wicked up into that insulation, wood shavings or whatever. It can get pretty damp and soggy and can kind of get moldy and not do the job for the bees. So you want some sort of insulation that won't wick moisture, and you can put that right on top of your colony. And again, that just keeps that top from getting too cold and having that warm air meet a very cold top. Then the next thing is your winter wrap. So there's a variety of different winter wraps, but typically anything black is pretty darn good. These are corrugated plastic and are actually what we recommend here. They're available through the Waterloo County Beekeepers Association, and they're just awesome wraps. They're very cost effective, very durable. Haven't had to throw out one yet. And very easy. They just fold on up, and to store them, it's very simple. But we'll put that wrap on. Just goes over the front. And then what we do is just fold up these flaps on top of that insulation. Put on our lid. And now the lid is made for a standard brood chamber box. And now that we've got this insulation on, it's not going to fit. So what we really want to do is get that back of the lid on tight and slide it forward. That way it is on a bit of an angle sloping back, so any sort of the rain / snow that's going to be pelting this lid will just kind of slop off the back, and we won't have to deal with a big pile up of that sort of stuff in front of the colony. So we have that tilted to the back. And the last thing, because that lid isn't on there super tight, we just end up putting a brick on top of our colony, and we're ready for winter.
Say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, Merry Christmas. Happy holiday.